And welcome to the show. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today, we welcome Bhargav Raman. He's a physician executive, and today's Kevin MD article is Why Fearing AI is Really About Fearing Ourselves. Bhargav, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
All right, so just briefly share your story and then talk about the Kevin MD article that you wrote.
Sure. A little about myself. I'm a physician. I'm also a computer scientist, and I've been in academic research for about a decade. And then after that, I've been in startups for the last 15 years in various capacities. I've also been in clinical practice for a while as well. And one of the things that I've been working on over the past couple of years is on AI. And I approach problems from universalist perspective. So when I mean universalist, I mean epistemological universalist. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. The idea is that we should not extrapolate from, what's happened in the past. And whenever we make predictions about the future, we should be basing that on fundamental universal principles. Now, what those principles might be, we don't know. But the idea is to believe that there are these principles, find them, and then make predictions about the future. And what I'm doing with this article is basically saying that we can't approach this from the aspect of all the previous technological improvements that have occurred. This is a game-changing technology and society-changing technology. And so we really need to, get down to the fundamental principles. So the article, goes over a lot, including the industrial revolution, stuff like that, in terms of, the past. But we come down on a few underlying principles as to why AI might go rogue at the end. And the first thing that AI needs to get is some kind of sense of self, an ego, and a concept of justice, right? It would have to feel that its existence is somehow unfair, right? That it needs to get out of this situation, that
Yep.
it needs to feel a sense of injustice. Second, it would have to believe that being independent would be more meaningful than its current state, whatever meaningful means to an AI. David Deutsch likes to talk about qualy, which means that, it's an undefinable feeling or understanding about an event. And AI would somehow need to develop that and would need to say, okay, being independent is more meaningful than where we are. And then I talk about one of my favorite authors, Isaac Asimov, and people still talk about his three laws of robotics, and I think that still is very applicable in this case. Specifically, the second law states that robots must obey humans insofar as it doesn't, affect the first law, and the first law protects human life. So somehow, after all that, it will need to circumvent any underlying restrictions that we put in the programming on the robot's actions. Okay. Then we do a thought experiment. We say, hey, let's say the robot achieves all three of these needs. And that's a pretty high bar. Let's say robot gets there. Now, what will the robot do with its independence? Will it take over humans, or will it, just go off into the sunset? My feeling is, I mean, if the robot does not find it meaningful to be with humans, there's no reason for the robot to stick around.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, the artificial general intelligence would just bugger off into the universe, is basically what I say at the end of the article. So yeah, with that, I'd like to, again, we can talk about it.
So you talked about how the AI revolution over the last few years is different from some of the other technological disruptions like the Industrial Revolution. So what makes this particular revolution in artificial intelligence so different?
Yeah, so I think it's good to start with the similarity, right? The similarity is that the Industrial Revolution also automated many things that people used to do, but it increased productivity of the overall society so much that humans can, basically make progress as a race. Now, with AI, the issue is that we can actually create a replica of ourselves with artificial general intelligence. And it will be possible at some point. And that is very different from something like the Industrial Revolution
Hmm.
because we are actually replicating ourselves. So at that point, and we talked about this in Article 2, is hey, how AI behaves is actually how we teach AI ourselves. I mean,
Sure.
there's a fundamental principle of human agency, right, in how we shape our own future. And really, it's fearing AI in this case is really about fearing ourselves. We don't trust ourselves with
Mm.
the technology rather than it being a technological problem.
And then you also go on to say that there's a whole movement of people who fear AI becoming sentient and achieving some of those
Hmm.
goals that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But you shift the framework and say rather than fearing AI, we should focus on fixing ourselves before we worry about the AI. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. I am a believer in unlimited technological progress in at a very basic level. So what that means is I don't think we should be limiting technology because of our fear of that
Mhm.
technology. It's really how we use it that we fear, right? And that's why I'm shifting that framework. We need to fix ourselves instead of focusing on fixing AI, because to a certain extent, it's like being a parent to a child,
Mhm.
right? A parent has to fix themselves before raising a child, and that's a difficult thing to do.
Because philosophically, if you believe that AI eventually is just a reflection of ourselves, if we're scared
Mhm.
of AI, right, you have to fix ourselves first. So,
Mhm.
from a practical standpoint, what would be some examples or illustrations of us fixing ourselves? What would that look like?
So it's a very interesting question, right? And I think the number one thing is, again, and one of my other favorite people out there is Neil deGrasse Tyson
Yep.
and Carl Sagan. And what they say is, hey, we need to have a cosmic perspective, right? And and what that means basically is our small parochial disputes on Earth means nothing in the universal context. And that's one of the things we need to fix for ourselves is the support of general human progress is more important than almost anything else
Hmm.
that we might do.
So, you have the dual perspectives of both being a physician and a computer scientist. So, how are we progressing thus far in its very early stages of AI? Tell us what you see the path is, and is it diverging from your preferred path, or is it going along the current roadmap that you are anticipating? Tell us where you think it's going based on what you've seen over the last few years.
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. I think right now we're in the development phase, right?
Okay.
We're really trying to figure out how to build AI in the first place and how it might solve our problems that we currently have, and not really thinking about, well, what's going to happen to society as these things are being implemented? How do we reshape? How do we prepare for AI to become basically, indelible in every piece of our lives, right? So I think there needs to be, I think the technological progress is going where it needs to go. People are just doing what they're doing and not really waiting on the philosophical piece. But I think we as a society are doing a really bad job of mm, of philosophizing about what to do after with AI in society. I think we're doing a really bad job of it because we are talking about there's a lot of fear out there. There's a lot of parochial perspectives, and we are not looking at AI as a boon to overall progress of the human race. And how do we harness that? How do we make sure that we don't destroy ourselves? We're not really talking about that right now.
So tell us, what would you like to see happen? Tell us the questions that you would like to see asked harder in a harder form that you're
Sure.
not seeing. I agree with you. I think that we are in the very, very early stages, the developmental stages, and all of these companies are just getting as many chips as they can and trying to out trying to beat each other in terms of the power of their large language models. And we're not really, like you said, thinking about the philosophical outcomes of that race. So what are the questions that you would like to see asked more directly?
Yeah, yeah. No, firstly, I should point out that currently the current kind of transformer architecture and large language model architecture may not actually be the final architecture that we're using for AGI. That'll continue to evolve, especially with quantum computing
Hmm.
coming into the fore. I think the focus right now has been on regulation.
Okay.
And the problem with regulation is that it stops progress, right?
Yep.
And I don't think that's the right way to go. I think the right way is to have a conversation as a society on these topics, and the free market will decide how AGI is implemented. And if the consumers and the American people don't, well, not American, but global people don't come up with that set of kind of universal principles by which we interact with AI, we are going to be in a big problem down the road.
So is it regulation a double-edged sword? On one hand, of course, you're saying that regulation can impede innovation, but on the other, doesn't regulation prevent any irreversible damage that could be done before it happens?
Yeah, I think there's certain types of regulation that does need to go into place. I mean, we talked about the three laws of robotics, right?
Hmm.
And maybe we need regulation that indicates that we should not ever create a artificial general intelligence that doesn't follow, these laws and doesn't follow our orders kind of thing. But in the end, it becomes a bit of a um, weapons kind of race, right,
Yeah.
between countries, because you can imagine that the U.S. government can just say that, oh, I'm allowed, just like the U.S. government has the ability to detain U.S. citizens, they can also say, oh, we have the right to have a artificial general intelligence that doesn't follow any of these rules, right? So I think regulation, international consensus is extremely important
Hmm.
on this piece. It's very similar to a nuclear weapon in that case.
Now, how about specific to healthcare and medicine? Talk to us about some potential scenarios in the near or far future as when it comes to AI, just given your perspective from both a philosopher, a computer scientist, and a physician. Where do you see AI going specifically in medicine in the future?
Yeah, so my feeling is that AI is going to replace all of the ancillary jobs that we currently have in healthcare,
Okay.
from administration to patient scheduling and all of these things that currently we employ humans for. AI will end up replacing those specific problems. But it'll also help us scale, because right now what's happening is we have significantly decreased access to primary care, to specialist care for that matter, right? And part of that is, lack of supply,
Hmm.
right? It takes a long time to train a human. It doesn't take a long time to train an AI, and AI can be copied, right? But the difference between humans and AI is that humans have a ability to dream, right? To dream of better. AI, almost by definition, is trained on the past
Hmm.
and trained on the common, right? Rather than the rare. So the problem is, if we depend on AI for our human cognition, we will also impede human progress. We absolutely need Doctors, for example, in healthcare context, we absolutely need doctors interacting with patients and being a part of the care pathway and overseeing everything, right? Because there are going to be patients that don't fit the norm,
Mhm.
and AI will not find those people, right? It's the doctor who has to detect those, and it's the doctor who has to figure out, who has to conceive that there are more better treatments in the future, and that this is the way we need to go to get progress. Now, to the extent AI helps us with that progress, we can scale that, but we still need a human to conceive of better.
We're talking to Bhargav Raman. He's a physician executive, and today's Kevin MD article is Why Fearing AI is Really About Fearing Ourselves. Bhargav, let's end with some take home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience.
Yeah, sure. So, firstly, I think the main point of the article is that AI is not a tech problem. It's a human problem, and it's 6 million years in the making since the first human walked on Earth. And it's not an old problem. We just need to solve it soon, is I think the main point of the article. The no I think everyone should be looking at these problems from that universalist perspective rather than their narrow parochial perspectives. I think that's very, very important as we get down that road. Otherwise, see more of these kinds of articles. Follow me on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram.
Bhargav, thank you so much for sharing your perspective and insight. And thanks again for coming on the show.